This is episode 130 of the Death to Tyrants podcast. Hey guys, let's take a minute to talk about one of our sponsors, and that is Lorenzotti Coffee. I love these guys, not just because they were our very first sponsor, but because, like I've said many times, their coffee is so damn good. If you guys like coffee that tastes the way coffee is actually supposed to taste, you know, with natural flavors that come from the region and the roast of the beans rather than from artificial flavorings like some other brands use, well, then you'll love Lorenzotti Coffee. If you're a real coffee drinker like myself, you don't want these weird flavors in your coffee like key lime pie or blueberry muffin. You want strong, traditional flavors that actually come from the beans themselves, and that's exactly what you get with Lorenzotti Coffee. You can get Lorenzotti's signature Venetian blend. This stuff comes right from Italy, okay? You can do whole beans, medium fine grind, which that one's actually perfect to use in the French press like I prefer. It comes in these really cool, beautifully designed, resealable tins that ship to you hermetically sealed and keep the coffee very, very fresh. Guys, I cannot speak highly enough of Lorenzotti. They're lovers of liberty. They love this show. They support this show. So why not support them by getting yourself some damn good coffee? So go to lorenzotti.coffee. That is LORENZOTTI.coffee. Guess what? We got a promo code, and that, as you know, is DTTP for Death to Tyrants podcast. You'll get 10% off your order at checkout. Again, that's lorenzotti.coffee. Enter code DTTP at checkout. Let's get to the show.
The crushing weight of the tyrant's passage had left nothing unmarked.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Death to Tyrants podcast. You already know I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you now out of Lockhart, Texas. What the hell's going on with this election? By the time this episode drops, who knows? Because, you know, part of the confines of having just a once a week podcast is that sometimes by the time it drops, especially in 2020, the news cycle has gone nuts and you almost sound dated. So hopefully by the time you guys hear this, let's see, is this the right thing to say? Hopefully there's no president yet or president-elect. Maybe. Don't we kind of like some of his wild gridlock stuff? Whatever the case, I can give you a silver lining of it, I think, because, you know, I'm kind of an optimist by nature. And whoever wins this, it's a tie, basically, right? It's going to be by a sliver. There was no blue wave like all the pollsters and the media heads told us. There was no red wave like I saw some people on Twitter predicting. So whoever wins this, by about half the voting population, is going to seem illegitimate. And so obviously if it's Donald Trump winning it, it probably had to happen through some court systems, if not by some miracle that Nevada and Arizona flip to Trump, and Pennsylvania somehow stays with Trump, and Georgia stays with Trump. All of that seems almost like a far-fetched possibility, especially the people entrenched in our government system that have essentially been trying to oust Trump since before he even got elected. This might be their final push to get him out. So we shall see. But my point is, and so if Biden ends up the eventual winner of this, the Trump voters are going to look at him and say, well, you won through, I guess we'll say, shenanigans at the ballot counting stage of this whole thing, because that's what we're kind of seeing, some issues in Michigan, in Wisconsin. So either way, whatever happens here, half the voting population is not going to trust it. And when the president is considered illegitimate by half the voters, it's harder to get a lot done. And I think Trump, unfortunately, saw that, or maybe it is fortunate. He saw that the last 4 years. You know, he's having to fight a ridiculous Russia hoax investigation half the time, if not more than half the time. And so the things that Biden, a Biden administration, and the powers that control him would like to push upon all of us might be a bit tougher, especially since the Republicans did keep the Senate, it appears. So nationwide mask mandates, nationwide lockdowns, gun confiscation of any sort. All of those things are going to, in my opinion, be just about impossible for Biden and his people to enact upon the entire country. Now, I say the entire country because this gives a possible shot in the arm to states' rights, so to speak, to a system of federalism that basically this country was founded to have, that we haven't had in a long time. We could see some of that now. And so if Biden says, there's a nationwide lockdown, well, some of these red state governors might just say, no thanks. And at a lower level than that, some towns might say, no thanks. And at a lower level than that, you and me and people we know might say, no, we are going to keep working and doing what we do. You can't stop us. So again, whatever the case, the next few years, the next few months, just getting this shit determined could be quite interesting. So I guess we shall see. But my guest and I are going to talk all about the election and bring up various aspects of it. We even discuss, of course, the Libertarian Party and our thoughts on what went down with the LP and the presidential nominee in this past election. So I don't want to waste too much more of your time talking about all this now because it's a very good conversation. My guest is Johnny Profita. He is the host, the creator of the Peddling Fiction podcast, and it's a podcast I highly recommend. I actually heard about his podcast he did an ad with Dave Smith on Part of the Problem, and right around that time, a friend of mine texted me and said, you got to check out Peddling Fiction. It's really good. Well, he was correct. It is really good, and that's why I wanted to have Johnny on today. Not only does he host a very good podcast, he's also sponsored by the official coffee of the Death to Tyrants podcast, Lorenzotti Coffee. See what I did there, Johnny? I'm just messing with you. But thankfully, Zach, basically, he's a sponsor of his show. He's a sponsor of our show, Lorenzotti Coffee. As you know, code DTTP at checkout gets you 10% off. So let me tell you really quick. Johnny basically became an ANCAP right around 2008. And that's for those listening that aren't familiar with all the inside baseball terminology, anarcho-capitalist, basically a hardcore libertarian. So he did that right around 2008 when he was influenced by Peter Schiff, Tom Woods, and through them he discovered the Austrian economists that all of us love and read, Rothbard, Mises, etc. Well, his eyes were open because of the 2008 financial crisis. That's how that all went down. And he started hearing a lot of people, as you guys probably did yourselves, give explanations that weren't correct. And so when you start hearing everyone, they're blaming free market capitalism, that doesn't make any sense. And you hear someone like Peter Schiff explain to you what really went down with that. And then you go to Tom Woods, and then you learn about Ron Paul and Mises and all of these wonderful minds in our little world here. Once your eyes are open to that, it's hard to close them again. So, like most of us, once he discovered all of these people, he became an anarcho-capitalist. Like I said, he runs the Peddling Fiction podcast. He's here today with us on Death to Tyrants. Johnny Profita, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Another lover of Lorenzotti Coffee. Zach is excited about this episode, don't you?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I say it's the official coffee of the Death to Tyrants podcast, but maybe it's the official coffee of both of ours, I suppose. Is that true?
Well, he was my first official sponsor, so I don't know if that counts for anything, but he'll definitely always have that special first love of my life.
Yes. The first was always the most memorable. So before we get into all of the stuff we have to talk about today, it is Wednesday, November 4th for the people listening to this as we record this. So you already know there's a lot to talk about, but you're currently staying down in Mexico. Is that correct?
Yes, I am in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And I've been down here off and on since about mid-July. I tried going back to Chicago for a couple weeks in late August, early September, and it didn't take. So I came right back.
Why did you leave Chicago? And then what made you want to just try and go back for a brief moment?
Yeah, well, I was just really bored. Usually Chicago in the summertime, it is great. But with all the COVID stuff going on, and we weren't fully locked down, but it didn't have the same appeal. They were doing weird stuff on the water where you couldn't bring your boats to certain places. You couldn't tie up with other people. And I always loved to go boating in the summer with some of my buddies and things like that. And, I have access to a wonderful condo here in Puerto Vallarta, and they opened up in June. And I just said, if I go down now, I could pretty much stay down there until Thanksgiving, which was way too tempting for me, I guess. I don't want to have to deal with the Chicago winter once it gets locked down there again. And so I flew on down, and I've just been living the dream ever since.
How is it down there? I think I heard you say on the Lions of Liberty podcast that they were starting, or actually it was on your podcast, that they were starting to do another lockdown. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. Last Friday, they decided to do I don't know if you'd call it a lockdown, but they closed stuff down early. So they came up with all these weird, arbitrary rules where restaurants and bars close at 8:30. You can't take an Uber after 8:30, but you can take cabs all night long. So they must have a pretty good cab lobbyist down here in Jalisco. The beach closes at 3. Except that the beach out in front of my place is relatively private, I guess. So they don't really close that down. I was just out there a couple hours ago, and there's people out there right now. So, it's weird, but it's not a full lockdown, and everything is a little calmer. I actually went to I crossed state lines this past weekend, and I went to a town called Sayulita, which is a little beach town about 45 minutes north of here. And it is fully wide open. Like COVID doesn't even exist there. I didn't wear my mask for 4 days, no matter where you went. And it was just, everybody was having a great time, parties everywhere, on the beach, restaurants, bars, fully open. So there's, I guess just like other places, you can always escape somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the biggest cultural difference down there for you?
Biggest cultural difference? I guess it's just the lifestyle. Everybody kind of takes their time down here. Nobody's in a rush. It is kind of frustrating when you need to get something done. Like I've had to have some work done around the condo, getting some water damage repaired or something like that. And these guys are just dragging their feet. But at the same time, you walk around, and Mexicans just enjoy every second of their life, no matter what sort of income level they're at. They could have nothing, they could have everything. They can find the simplest pleasure just enjoying the beach or the weather or whatever. They're always happy, they're always smiling. And that, from coming from a place like Chicago, where maybe I wasn't just the only one that was grumpy all the time. There's a lot of just miserable, grumpy people. And it's much more fast paced, and you're always, running around doing stuff. So I guess that's the biggest difference.
Has any of that, and just being down there amongst those people, has it changed you at all politically? Have you altered any of your previous views? Not
my political views. Definitely my outlook on life and my approach to how I'm going to live going forward. And COVID might have had a lot to do with that as well. And being locked down for, a couple months or whatever in Chicago, I'm not going to waste any more of it. I'm not going to sacrifice precious years of my life for somebody else, or because somebody else says I have to. And I'm just going to find a way to do the things that I want to do. And I think, being down here, seeing what's possible, because you get into this routine where you think there's this formula to life. You go to college, you get a degree, then you get your job, and you work until retirement. Mm-hmm. And then if you're lucky, at 65, you can come down to Puerto Vallarta, and you can be one of these old schlups I see walking across the pool all day long. And personally, I'd rather do that now.
Right.
And if I have to at 65, that's, I can sit in front of a computer screen all day and click a mouse. That shouldn't be a problem. But the things that I want to do now while I can still do them, fish, hiking, cliff diving, whatever it is, I'd much rather do that now. And I feel like I was wasting a lot of precious years of my life doing that 9-to-5 grind, stuck in a dead end job that you don't like, that just makes you miserable, but it's enough to keep the lights on. And,
right.
Yeah.
When did you become political or have an interest in politics?
Yeah, pretty early on. I was always interested in politics from probably like 7th or 8th grade. So like 13, 14, something like that. But it took me a long time to see the lights or get red pilled. I was probably what you would a conservative Republican up until I graduated college. And then I started to take that deep dive down the libertarian rabbit hole. And today I am officially an ANCAP, and it's been a wild ride. It's been a long journey, but I'd rather it have to see the world for what it really is, and deal with the fact that the frustrations, I should say, that nobody else really understands what's going on, than be one of these people that's still kind of plugged into the matrix.
Sure. What was the biggest, I guess, change for you, or what did you read or stumble across to change you from conservative Republican to first libertarian?
Well, the first thing that sort of sparked the whole transition was the whole 2008 financial crisis. I got my first job out of college. I was working in finance, and I started in like October of 2007. So within a year, it was financial Armageddon. The whole world's coming to an end, and nobody seemed to know why, except for a couple voices out there. Ron Paul. Mm-hmm. I ended up seeing the Peter Schiff was right video. Yeah. Somebody posted that in like a private Facebook group that I was in. And that really got me interested in the economics of it. So I came to it first from the Austrian economic standpoint. And once I got into that, I just started, I listened to his radio show every day. I started reading some of his books, and he was always peppering some libertarian ideas throughout the day in there. Yeah. I know Tom Woods guest hosted for him a couple times. Right. And then, and then I just started reading some of his stuff, and eventually some Rothbard and things like that. And once I got the economics of it down, I started to really dig into the philosophy, and it just, I don't know exactly when it clicked, but man, everything just comes right into focus. Yeah. And it's a beautiful philosophy. I think it really is the answer to all of our problems. And it's just a shame that it's so hard to get other people to see that, what that is.
Right. Were your parents, or are your parents, political?
My dad is, for sure. My dad is a staunch Republican, which is probably why I was up until I got out of the house. My mom is less so. She's more of a moderate. But my dad is up and down Republican ticket no matter what, and my mom bounces back and forth, which actually bothers me a little more. Like she used to talk about wanting to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Oh my goodness.
That didn't go over too well at the Christmas table.
I bet not. It's funny how people in our camp seem to have this lust for consistency, I suppose, and that, you said with no problem, my dad straight up and down the ticket Republican. Now my mom went back and forth. That really bothered me. And that would bother me too. Yeah, I am like obsessed with being logically consistent, and that's another one of the reasons why I love libertarianism, and that's why I eventually ended up being an anarcho-capitalist, because I couldn't deal with the fact that, the state is so evil, government, is force, and we can't have that, but we need a little bit of it just in these 3 or 4 areas of our lives. Right. And that never sat well with me. So there is definitely something inside me where logical consistency, even if it's, the wrong logic, at least I can understand that. Do they listen to your podcast?
Yeah. Well, they've asked me several times how they listen to it. And I've tried to explain to them how to do it. I don't know. I think they've heard a few episodes. I think my dad's probably listened to more than my mom, but yeah, they're still trying to figure out how to use their iPhones.
Gotcha. Since we're on the topic, talk about your podcast. And for those of my listeners that have not heard it yet, kind of give them the lowdown on it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's called Peddling Fiction. I initially started it with a buddy of mine who was more of a statist, moderate Democrat, I guess you would say, but really good guy, not a ideologue that's going to make everything into like this whole combative thing. But it was just me and him talking. He was named John as well, and we ended up we called him Johnny the Jew. I was Johnny the Gentile. And if I hadn't already picked the name Peddling Fiction, the Jew and the Gentile might have been the name of the podcast. But eventually some things came up and he started his own business. And it wasn't actually the dynamic that I was looking for the show. So he decided to do his own thing. And so now it's just me ranting into a microphone 2 days a week. I do it on Mondays and Thursdays, unless I end up having too much tequila down here in Mexico.
Yeah.
But I talk about current events, politics, and some economics from a libertarian perspective. And, I try to have fun with it. I keep it light. I don't get too bogged down in like autistic libertarian minutia. I want it to be something that's more approachable to somebody who's just getting into these ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that plays to one of my strengths where I can kind of break down some of this stuff that's really boring or kind of overwhelming into something that a layman or a statist could digest a little easier.
Right. What do your quote unquote normal friends think of it? Have you had any of them give you some feedback?
Yeah, they really like it. At least that's what they tell me.
Right.
I know a couple of them listen to it regularly. Most of my normal friends, they're either not very political or they lean more right than left.
Okay.
So I think, and especially since I came to libertarianism from the right, I can kind of communicate with them better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're fans. Yeah, they were a little surprised that I ended up starting it and that I've been doing it this long. I remember when one of my best friends was like scrolling through my thing. He's like, "Damn, dude, you've done a lot of episodes."
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "Well, yeah. I mean, what did you think? I was just fucking around with this? No, man, I'm taking this pretty seriously."
Excellent. Well, I guess the news of the day that we can go ahead and jump into now, and again, when this episode drops, there's no telling where we're going to be at with things. But the election was last night, and it's at the moment not decided. There's no winner, and I go from okay, I think Biden's going to probably get this, and then I read something. No, Trump's people are saying they are going to win Arizona and Nevada and Pennsylvania, and so I don't know what's going on. It will be interesting to see that when this drops, if there's any clarity at all, or we're still in the same kind of mess here. Aside from all of that, give us your thoughts on everything that's happened so far with this election.
Yeah, it was a really crazy night. I mean, when I first started watching the election coverage, everything was kind of going along as planned. Trump was winning his states, Biden was winning the ones that he was supposed to. And then they called Arizona for Biden really early, which was kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And then they weren't calling states like Florida for Trump, even though it looked like he had a commanding lead in there. They had like 95% of the votes in,
right? And
they still weren't calling it for him. And then I might have dozed off a little bit, just because I don't know how long you can watch people count votes in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And stay conscious. But when I woke back up, it was like, oh, Trump's running away with this. And the voting odds had completely flipped.
Yep.
And, the guys that run those bookies or whatever, they don't, that's not the dumb money. They usually know what they're doing.
Right.
And so I was like, oh man, it looks like this is going to be another 2016 kind of thing. He's got leads all over the place. And then I eventually went to bed, and I wake up for work this morning kind of early, and the whole thing had flipped back, and now Biden's projected to win. And then you find out that, they found a couple 100,000 ballots in Michigan and Wisconsin, and miraculously, they're all leaning Biden's way, like 100% of them.
Yeah.
And it is everything that I thought it was going to be going back a couple months ago when we knew that it was going to be mail-in voting.
Yeah.
And you had 100 million people voting early. It just a complete disaster. The worst case scenario was exactly what happened. Like, not a clear winner, and then a bunch of shenanigans going on with the vote counting, and it's going to be a wild couple of weeks here.
Yeah, for sure. Because now, if Trump were to be the eventual victor, I guess I could see it possibly happening without a court ruling, but I would say that would be unlikely. And if Biden is the eventual victor, then the right, the quote unquote right in America, the deplorables aren't going to see it as legitimate, because they're going to suspect there's been some shenanigans with voter fraud and cheating with the mail-in ballots and dumping of Trump ballots and finding new Biden ones all of a sudden. And like I said, if Trump somehow gets it and it does go through the court system, well, the left already didn't see his first term as legitimate, and they certainly wouldn't see the second one as legitimate. Do you see a silver lining in that aspect of it at all?
I do. It's kind of hard to see, but yeah, I like anything that delegitimizes government and sort of puts a spotlight on the corruption or the ineptitude or whatever it is. And I'm hoping that regardless of what happens, half the country is going to see the president as illegitimate. And I'm hoping that whichever half that is just sort of checks out of this whole federal government centralized power thing.
Yes.
And I think that could be at least a step in the right direction when states just sort of nullify federal decree.
Yes.
And they start doing their own thing. Secession, I think we need to break up. I mean, this is like the worst marriage you've ever seen.
Yes.
It's like the cops are being called to your house every other week for domestic abuse or something. And hopefully, states, especially if the right ends up losing, which it does seem like they're going to try to get this to Biden.
Yeah.
And I guess we shouldn't have been surprised by that after all the things that they were doing to Trump.
Right.
You had the deep state coup, Russia collusion, impeachment. Yes. He's been fighting off the establishment for the last 4 years. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that they'd be messing around with the ballots or whatever to get him out of there if that's the case. But the right, I would see as more of a peaceful dissent, hopefully some secession, nullification, whatever it may be. The left, I mean, if Trump ends up winning this thing, they are going to go ballistic. More ballistic if he had just won it outright on, last night.
Uh-huh.
And they seem to be far more serious and prepared to engage in violence to get their way.
Yes.
And that scares me a little bit.
What are the locals' thoughts down there on all of this, and the locals in Mexico? Do you get any feedback from those people?
I haven't talked to any locals today. Just nobody's really been around. The whole. I actually haven't really left my condo complex yet, but in general, they hate Donald Trump.
Okay.
So yeah, I haven't run into any Mexicans down here that say favorable things about him. So I'm sure they'd be happy if Joe Biden won. I have a good friend of mine here. He's from Canada. Well, I say good friend. We've known each other for like a month, but we've been hanging out a lot down here. And he's actually gotten really interested in politics since the COVID thing. Mm-hmm. He's one of these people that before all this pandemic stuff, he didn't care about politics at all. Uh-huh. And once it started affecting his daily life, and he's got to watch TV to figure out what he can do the next day. Yep. Then he started getting really involved in it, and he's actually pulling for Donald Trump, which I thought was interesting coming from a Canadian. Yeah,
no doubt, and that's interesting. You bring that up because I've seen the lockdown stuff really get people that were previously maybe apolitical or just kind of were halfway interested in it, they became really interested in it because, like you said, you have to watch the news to see if you're allowed to work in some places. How would a Biden presidency be worse in your mind as an outcome than a Trump victory?
Well, I think I'd be paying a lot more in taxes. So there's that. And it just seems like they're going to go really crazy with all of these pandemic restrictions. Like they're so pro mandate. You know, they're going to mandate this, they're going to mandate that. So you're going to have to wear a mask everywhere. And even if they come up with a vaccine or something like that, I'm worried that they're not going to let you travel or something like that unless you take it. So you'll have to get like something on your passport that says you've been vaccinated, or even just to leave the state or the country. You know, things like that. I think are more likely to come out of a Biden presidency for some reason, and I guess it's just because their approach to it has been just so much more authoritarian than Trump's.
Yeah, and I found that part interesting, that a lot of my left-leaning friends would say that Trump is an authoritarian, and yet they were the ones that were for the person in charge mandating a nationwide lockdown or mandating nationwide mask laws. Did you see the same thing?
Yeah. And it really is unbelievable that the left they were supposed to be, you know, the rebels, right? That don't go along with government decree and the man, you know, fighting the man.
Right.
And they're just embracing it like you've never seen before. Like California's like the most locked down state we have, and they're just voting for Biden like crazy. I wish that when this had first started, that Donald Trump would have actually engaged in some of that 4D chess that he gets credit for all the time.
Yes, me too.
And he had just been like Mr. COVID panic guy, masks everywhere, lock it all down, just so that everybody on the left and the mainstream media would have resisted it a little bit.
That's a good point. Yeah. And I noticed, like you said, Arizona got called so quickly last night, yet Florida and Texas, where I'm at, anyone living here knows it's going red, and they're waiting. And my wife and I are going, just call Texas. We all know it's going red, but they waited a long time. Yet within seconds of the polls closing in California, they declared Biden the winner, which seems, I suppose, obvious. But I thought the same thing. They're one of the most locked down states in the nation, and it's almost like they said, "Yeah, give me more of that." It seems.
Oh yeah, Did you see Newsom's Thanksgiving rules?
His rules. I did see that, and I would think that there'd be a statewide revolt against that kind of thing, and that he would become a worldwide, if not nationwide at least, laughingstock. But now I almost wonder, do Californians like that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, except that all signs point to yes. It seems like they feel like they're being virtuous by sitting 6 feet apart, not singing or chanting you can't eat turkey on Thanksgiving, no communal dishes can be served and things like that. I don't know. I've never thought that it could get this bad this quickly. Like, this really surprises me. And you think back to some of these really oppressive regimes, like Nazi Germany or something like that.
Yes.
And you'd always wonder, be like, how could people just be ratting out their neighbors for, stashing somebody in their attic?
Yep.
And then you walk down the street and you see these like masked psychopaths that are going to freak out at you. I saw somebody get just curb stomped. I think this was actually in Toronto, for not wearing a mask. And it's just like, that's how they do it.
Right.
Just an ass load of propaganda.
Yep.
And that's really all it takes, is like a couple of months of just fear mongering.
Yeah, no doubt. The people that would rat on someone in the Underground Railroad, a slave escaping back in the 1860s, we know who they are now. We know the type of people, because unfortunately we see a lot of them. The people that are going to rat you out for not wearing a mask, rat your business out if you're in a state like California for operating when maybe it shouldn't be according to the official rules. And so I find that fascinating. The group that's typically will proclaim themselves as tolerant are really the ones that would have been ratting out a Jew hiding out in an attic or a slave escaping the South through the Underground Railroad. I assume you see that same thing.
Yeah, and they think they're doing like the noble thing, which is just incredible to me.
Yeah, I actually saw someone, it was a guy covered in tattoos on Facebook last night, a heavy metal musician complaining. This is, of course, when it looked like Trump might win. Well, it looks like I'm not going to get my universal basic income now. And I just thought, what a strange phenomenon. What a strange world we're in right now when these like rough and tough looking tattooed guys are upset that Biden was possibly about to lose and they wouldn't get paid to sit and do nothing. It's strange. But what do you think the Biden, if it were to be this way, the Biden presidency will mean for foreign policy as opposed to where we've been the last few years?
Ooh, that's a good question. They seem like war hawks to me, especially, I mean, I don't know how long Biden's actually going to be in there.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good point.
Who knows if it's going to be a month or 2 months or something. He's already really lost a lot of his mental faculties. So you're going to have Kamala Harris in there, and man, she really scares me. And the way that they want to handle places like North Korea, I feel like they might just try to do something just to make a point. And I don't see them ending any of these wars or bringing the troops home or anything like that.
Right.
I think more likely it's just going to be more of exactly the same. You know, we're going to keep our troop presence around the world. We're going to be drone bombing. You know, we're going to be sanctioning everybody. Yeah, I think it's pretty much going to be the same. And at least with Donald Trump, you get some of the rhetoric that you want to end these things. Not like that's as important as actually doing it. But,
right. Sure.
I feel like they love to use those tools, especially the sanctions, where you're just like starving children to death in Yemen or something like that.
Right.
I think there's going to be a lot of that. Yeah.
I want to tell you guys about a great sponsor of the Death to Tyrants podcast, and that is our friends over at Zippix Toothpicks. These are flavored toothpicks. They've got several great flavors. Check these out: cinnamon, clove, mocha, and whiskey even. But not only that, each toothpick actually contains nicotine, and I use these toothpicks all of the time. Not only are they a great alternative to that nasty habit you may be trying to stop, and that includes vaping, come on now, but they taste great. They are way more socially acceptable. They are cheaper than any alternative. Hell, I don't even dip or smoke or anything like that, and I still love these Zippix toothpicks. Out of all the alternatives on the market, these are the most cost-effective, and better yet, they are a sponsor of this show. When a small business is out there helping to support one of your favorite Liberty podcasts like this one, let's thank them by returning the support. Since you are a loyal listener to the Death to Tyrants podcast, you will get 10% off of your order by entering promo code DTTP at checkout when you order over at zippixtoothpicks.com. Once again, go to zippixtoothpicks.com. That's ZIPPIX toothpicks.com and type in promo code DTTP for Death to Tyrants podcast at checkout, and you will get 10% off of your order, and you will be supporting Zippix and Death to Tyrants at the same time. So go do it. Let's get back to the show. Well, we've talked about the election this whole time, and I've not even mentioned libertarianism. And we both are at least small L libertarians. So I'd like to get your thoughts on the current state of libertarianism. Jo Jorgensen, and what did you think of her campaign? Your thoughts on the official Libertarian Party? Where do you fall on all of this kind of stuff?
So, well, I actually haven't seen the results of any of the libertarian voting. Did she crack 1%?
I believe it was just about 1%. I've not followed that closely either, but I believe I did see it was around 1%.
Yeah. So, I mean, I couldn't stand most of the Libertarian Party, like the Nick Sarwarks of the world. They just really drive me crazy. I don't like the idea of appealing to this woke crowd, trying to get people on board that just have almost no chance of embracing libertarianism.
Yeah.
These type of people where you have to be 100% in lockstep with all of their crazy ideas, or you're literally Hitler, right?
Yeah.
Like you could agree with them all the way up to, not injecting kids with hormones to change their gender, and once you draw the line there, they're out.
Yep.
So I think their whole approach was misguided.
Yeah.
Jo Jorgensen was just really boring to me. I never understood her appeal. She's just kind of like a wet blanket or something. No charisma. The messaging was kind of weird. Yeah, I didn't vote for the record, like for anybody. But I couldn't see her inspiring a lot of people to go vote for the Libertarian Party. And the idea that, Nick Sarwark was like going around making bets that they were going to get 5% of the vote.
Yes.
I wish he would have given me that opportunity.
Yeah, no kidding. For those listening that are saying, who's Nick Sarwark? He was the chairman of the Libertarian Party, and there's a lot of hatred directed his way from a lot of people in the camp that I believe Johnny and myself find ourselves in. Let me ask you this. Do you see the Libertarian Party as a good vehicle to further the libertarian message or libertarian movement? Or do you see another vehicle like working within one of the major parties to pursue that goal?
That's a good question. I think the Libertarian Party could be a good vehicle, but you have to really differentiate yourself and take some risky positions and not really back down from them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that thing that Gary Johnson tried to do where you're talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Yeah.
And you can't just be milk toast like Jo Jorgensen. You have to have somebody that really understands libertarianism, the principles of it, and can communicate that message. But I guess, if you had that person running on the Republican ticket, like Ron Paul, you could be just as successful. I think we missed a really big opportunity in 2016 where you had just the two worst candidates that nobody liked. Nobody wanted anything to do with them. And you didn't have an incumbent, right? This year, one of the other reasons why I knew the Libertarian Party wasn't going to crack like 2% is because you have an incumbent president. So, Trump's going to get all those votes, all those Republicans that might have voted third party. And, so, I don't know. Long story short, I don't know. Either way, the Libertarian Party just seems to be inept. And I don't know if they'll ever get their act together.
Yeah, I'm not sure they can ever get out of their own way, it seems. I mean, there are some positives within the LP, which I would say would be the Mises Caucus. Everything they've done seems to be worthwhile, but then you realize you're still up against an entrenched. It's almost like Trump within the federal government. You start to see like you're up against this entrenched class of people. It's just tough to get them out of the way. And so we shall see where that goes over the next few years. If Trump does lose this contested election here, do you see any political realignments within the Republican Party? Do you see any hope for people like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie? Or do you think it's going to devolve back to warmongering neocons, unfortunately? Well,
I don't see people leaning more Rand Paul or Thomas Massie, unfortunately. But I think we're going to end up with somebody more like Trump. I don't think these Trump supporters are going anywhere just because they lost this election.
That's a good point.
I think they are here to stay.
Yeah.
The political landscape has completely changed. There's been like a big line drawn in the sand.
Yeah.
And just because Trump is out of it, the reason he got elected, which was they wanted to give a big middle finger to the establishment.
Yeah.
That's not going anywhere. In fact, it's probably even stronger now because they're going to feel like they got screwed out of another 4 years of Trump.
Right.
So I don't know if warmongering, hopefully not.
Right.
And, Trump is, I don't know if I'd call him a warmonger. He hasn't started any new wars, so he's got that going for him.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, to this day, still wildly unpopular.
Yeah.
Which is weird because we've been fighting these wars for 20 years and nobody seems to want to except for those establishment guys. But I think the sort of Trump populism, whatever, is the way that the Republican Party is going to go.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a wise time when you're talking about this realignment for Republicans to take kind of the route that you're talking about, because if you got Joe Biden in, I mean, let's face it, that's the candidate the neocons want in there, especially in comparison to Donald Trump. This is the time for the right to return to the anti-war roots of the old right and take that angle, in my opinion, because I think it's unfortunately likely if Biden does win that there could be some new skirmish in the next few years where he's trying to at least saber rattle and go to war. I think a wise move would be for the Republican Party to become the anti-war party. And I think that's, Ron Paul said it many times, and I agree with him, that's always the more popular stance to take. Not only that it's more popular, but I mean, it's the right stance to take morally, but certainly with it, I think would come more votes and more young votes down the road too. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And it's just so obvious. It's right there on the table. Nobody even remembers why we're fighting these wars.
Right.
It's just, and we're getting nothing out of it. We're spending a ton of money. We're destroying entire countries in the Middle East that most Americans can't even find on a map. And they're sending their sons and daughters out there to go get their legs blown off or come back with PTSD or something like that. It's just the whole thing is an unmitigated disaster. And it's just incredible to me that they can get it to persist this long. And the fact that even if you get somebody in there who tries to pull these troops out, the amount of vitriol and just everybody comes at. Do you remember when Trump was like talking about taking troops out? Was it Syria?
Yes.
And all of a sudden it was like, oh, the Kurds.
Yeah. The left all of a sudden remembered the Kurds. It was interesting how that happened. And then silence right after it. And then Trump, he kind of backed down from that. It's like this fighter who prides himself in being such a tough guy back down from that. And that's
he never really follows through on those positions. He sort of like puffs up his chest like he's acting real hard, but then once the backlash comes, he retreats a little bit, which was a little surprising to me, but that seems to be his modus operandi.
Yeah. Did you see over the years, I know you mentioned your father was a Republican. I assume you would consider him a Trumper. Any Trumper type friends or family in your life, did they become red-pilled over any of these issues the last 4 years?
Yeah, I would say, well, maybe not fully red-pilled, but definitely some of my friends have had it. Even not Trump supporters, but I got a text from my buddy who's I think he was a pretty left-leaning guy. I mean, he's Jewish, so 95% chance he's a liberal Democrat, right? But he was out in California. And he moved to Texas, like a lot of Californians are doing. Mm-hmm. But he texted me the other day and he's like, man, I'm just becoming so disgusted with the left. I can't take it anymore. And they're starting to, I think the lockdown stuff and just the riots and the looting, that has turned a lot of people off and toward the Trump side. And people that were leaning Trump or were already voting for Trump, they're more entrenched and just they're really starting to see just how corrupt the media is and the extent that people and institutions will go to sort of just take control of everything.
Do you see the left in general, their movement as a supremacist movement? And by that I mean, like any supremacist movement, basically that they don't want to stop until everyone goes the way of the left, basically?
Yeah, I guess you could say that, because they claim to be the party of like love and tolerance and everything like that, but they are the least tolerant people that I've ever run into.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier, if you're not 100% on board with their agenda, they will come after you, right? They will, try to get you fired from your job. They'll try to cancel you any way they can.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't like anybody that doesn't, that isn't in lockstep with them, that doesn't subscribe to 100% of their agenda. And if they have to, they seem like they'll be willing to use violent means if necessary, or however they have to get their guy into office who's going to just use all of that power that we've now given the presidency and the federal government to make sure that you fall in line.
Yeah, it's one of the trends I've seen on social media among the left today, the day after the election, is that it was way too close. Apparently, a lot of them predicted more of a blue wave. It's not the elation that I thought I would see, because like we mentioned, as of now, it looks like Biden might win, but the joy and celebration's not there as much because they're shocked that it was even close. In fact, someone I know personally that's on the left said here in Texas, there's nothing like knowing you live in a state with 24 million of literally the worst people on earth. And it's like, there's a lot of bad people on earth, and you're just mentioning that because they voted for Donald Trump, they're in that category. It's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And they've learned nothing from this whole experience.
Correct.
They were like, all those polls basically reflect how much that they've learned. They had Biden ahead in everything across the board.
Yeah.
And I predicted on my podcast on Monday that I thought Trump was going to pull this out. Not by much, but they were talking about Florida and Texas being in play, and that was just ridiculous to me.
Yes, I see it every 4 years. The Texas is going to flip blue, and I just smile and roll my eyes, and it's, trust me, at least when Donald Trump was the candidate for the Republicans, I knew it was not going to. Now we'll see what happens in 4 years if if the Republicans make the mistake of putting anyone like in the Mitt Romney camp back up, then all bets are off. There's no telling. But I kind of think what you were saying might be correct in that the Trump phenomenon doesn't seem to be going away because those people they've not been inspired like that in my lifetime, really, maybe since Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember much of Reagan. I was too young, but it was unbelievable to see the crowds turn out for Donald Trump. I've never seen anything like that.
Certainly for an incumbent. I thought it reminded me of Barack Obama's lead up to his first run, because I saw giant crowds then, and then especially his inauguration night and everything. But it didn't happen the second time with Obama like that. And for someone to be an incumbent and draw these crowds that specifically loved him, that's what was shocking to me.
Yeah, and they're really weird rallies that he was holding. He's like, it's somewhere between like a political speech and like some sort of festival that you go to,
with elements of a comedy show thrown in where he's making fun of the other people, and it was all off the cuff. And there was a certain brilliance to it. There's no doubt about it, and it was quite different from the masked up, kind of stuttering old man that was his opponent.
Oh God, yeah. I heard about that rally that he held where people were sitting in cars.
Yeah, honking when they agree with him. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, going into this, that's why I was like, Trump, I can't imagine Trump losing to this guy. I just can't.
Yeah.
Biden's got people, he's holding events, he gets like 25 people go to it. Trump gets 50,000.
Yeah.
It just, all the signs were pointing to Trump except for the polls, which I kind of knew were way off.
Right.
So, I definitely thought it was going to be a lot closer than it is, but it could have gone either way, I suppose. But man, for Donald Trump to lose to Joe Biden, when Joe Biden didn't even really campaign, he's just been sitting in a bunker somewhere for the last few months.
Yeah.
And I never thought, even just in the primaries, I was thinking back to the episodes that I was doing back then, and I was like, there is no way Joe Biden gets this nomination.
Right. A lot of us
It would be
thought
the-
that. Yeah. It's funny how quickly that turned on a dime. Just, it went from, of course, the media had their darling every week. It was Kamala, that didn't work. It was Beto, that didn't work. Pete, that didn't work. Bernie, they didn't want him to work, and it seemed like it was going to. And then all of a sudden, Joe Biden. Everyone falls in line, drops out, and they back him. It was so strange.
Yeah. I guess, we should have probably realized that they would come up with something similar to make sure he won this election.
Yeah.
Because, they get everybody to drop out right before Super Tuesday except Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
So she can take just enough votes from him. And what they've done to get him into this position is pretty incredible. You got to really hand it to him. The fact that a senile old man with dementia who has had accusations of, touching women or something, he's sniffing kids, and then his son's, falling asleep with crack pipes in his mouth. Nothing. He's almost as Teflon Don as Teflon Don.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I've mentioned it a few times. This will drop a few days after we record it, and so it's 2020. There's no telling what is going to happen in the next few days. You might look like a brilliant fortune teller. Do you have any predictions as to what's going to go on in not just the next few days, but the next few months with all of this?
Well, I think, as more and more of these mail-in ballots get counted, that all of these close battleground states are going to go to Biden. And that was something that I talked about before the election. Like, Trump was going to have a big day on election night. And then as these things keep coming in, they're going to go Biden's way. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with all these challenges. I know that he's already demanding a recount in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
God, I can't, I have no idea. I think it's probably going to have to go to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And then from there, who knows? I know Trump's got a few nominees in there that might have his back, but at the same time, I don't know if they're going to want to risk the sort of backlash that would come from giving this to Donald Trump. And the establishment, and who knows what sort of deep state operatives are working behind the scenes to make sure that he doesn't get another term. So I think what's happened so far was sort of a wake-up call for me, and I don't think they're going to let Trump take this, even if he did outright win it.
Yeah.
I think they're going to find a way to give it to Biden.
And like you mentioned early on, I think if that were to be the case, maybe there's a silver lining in that some nullification, some states' rights once again might be in order. So if Biden were to win and he says, I'm going to mandate a nationwide lockdown, I could see some red states saying, no thanks. You can say that. We think you're illegitimate, and we think that we will control, or at least not allow you to control what happens within our state.
No, I think you're right, and that is one of the best things about a Biden presidency is that I think, a couple things. You're going to start seeing Republicans act like Republicans again. All of a sudden, the national debt's going to matter, right? And they'll start resisting some of this government spending. But one of the worst things about Donald Trump is that once everything goes bad, since he's on the Republican ticket, it's all going to get blamed on, free market capitalism and deregulation.
Right.
And now if he's out of there, hopefully, we can keep this charade going long enough so that the stench of Donald Trump can fade. And this could hopefully fall at the heels of just a federal government that's way too big and incompetent and not pointed directly at basically libertarian values that Republicans pay lip service to and then govern like left of center Democrats.
Right. Yeah. So if I've thought that same thing, if there were to be a Biden presidency for one, and then a recession within that time, it's not going to be easy to point the old finger at free market capitalism like they like to do, even though that's not particularly what we have here, but certainly under a Biden presidency, I don't think it's going to be at all what we have. So that's a good point too. Maybe in 2024, there's a referendum on big government socialism.
I certainly hope so. I'm not going to be holding my breath.
Right. Maybe some states will have already left the union by then. Interesting times ahead. Before we get out of here, I want you to plug your podcast, your social media presence, anything you'd like to, really.
Excellent. Yeah. So again, the podcast is Peddling Fiction. It is available on all of those platforms you listen to your favorite podcasts on. I have a website, peddlingfictionpodcast.com. You can go there. I'm on Twitter @peddlefiction. I basically just use that to drop dank memes from time to time and promote the show. We do have a private Facebook group too. So if you start listening to the show and you like what you hear, you can find the private Facebook group, at least until we get canceled on there, like all the other big libertarian podcasts out there. But you could join that. I got a lot of good people in there. I have a lot of fun with it. We do some live streams and things like that. And then, YouTube channel, Peddling Fiction, for if you want some shorter clips that you can listen to. And I think that's about it.
Excellent. I will link to those things in the show notes page for this episode. Johnny Profita, Peddling Fiction Podcast. Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on anytime.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed my chat with Johnny. What a crazy moment we are in. Once again, how many times can we have said that in 2020? A lot. So why would we expect this presidential election to be anything but a wild, crazy mess, just like a lot of things have been this year? But I hope you've enjoyed this chat. I hope you guys enjoy hearing these episodes and that it's maybe a little bit of an escape for you. Even though we talk about some current events, I hope that the points of views that you hear on this show can open your mind up and make you think about things a little bit differently, and share this with people. If you'd like to leave a wonderful, nice, or mean review of the show, please do on iTunes. And you guys have been leaving some really nice things for me on there, so I appreciate that. The ratings have been nice. The reviews have been quite nice as well. So thank you so much. Obviously, you know my website already, death2tyrantspodcast.com. You can find all the links on there, the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can hear some episodes. You can find it all on our t-shirts are there too. You can find it all there, death2tyrantspodcast.com. What's going to happen with this election? I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Death to Tyrants podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.